Okay, so what we're going to do right now is take a look at the P7 revision mock exam. I'm going to do this in two stages. First thing we're going to do is take a look at the exam paper and look at what the questions are asking and just prepare ourselves mentally to make sure we're following the right approach, we understand what the questions are getting at, because that way, once we get into the detailed stories, we are much more likely to maximise our marks. So, just before we take a look at the actual question paper, a couple of very important key reminders. The P7 exam does not have a great pass rate, and there are a number of reasons for this, and a couple of them are very, very easy for us to sort out right now. First issue. P7, a very repetitive exam, our examiner very predictable. Technique exists for each type of question that tends to come up. So the first thing we're going to do is go through the exam paper and make sure we understand what each of the questions is asking and think about what technique we should be using to focus our minds before we get into the detail. A couple of things to remember when we come to writing our actual answers. Dates, very important in this exam. We need to remember we are sitting this exam in June 2014 because that will have an impact on the dates, so very, very important. And year ends in questions are going to be important as well. Whenever we see a date, we need to think about it. When we come to writing our actual answer, we must make sure we explain every point that we make. This is P7. You are not going to earn a mark for writing 3 or 4 words. We need proper sentences, and the best way to make sure we explain everything is to put the word because or as or in order to in everything we say. Force yourself to do it. Now that's enough general ideas. Let's go take a look at the exam paper and we'll see what the questions are asking. So here we go. Here is the exam. Let's scroll straight down to question number 1. As expected, it is a 35-mark question. No great surprise there because question 1 will always be 35 marks these days. The question simply says, respond to the email from Mike Ross, so we can't do anything until we've looked at the email, so we're going to go take a look. Couple of points to note. There are professional marks in parts A and C. We'll think about those in a minute. And it also tells us the date to assume, in this case, June 2014. The actual date within the month's not that important. We've only put that there for the revision mock to make it feel like a real exam day. Of course, when you sit the exam, it will be June the 2nd, 2014. There's no need to assume a date because you know what the date is. So let's go take a look at what this email wants. And there we see the 35 marks. Part A, using the information you have gathered so far, identify and explain business risks facing La Croix. So immediately, I can think of some technique. There are 13 marks available. It says identify and explain. Normally that means up to 1.5 marks per risk. A little bit odd because 13 does not divide nicely by 1.5. But it suggests we're looking for maybe 8 or 9 risks at 1.5 marks each. So that gives me a rough idea of how many things I'm looking for. It says business risks. And whenever I see business risks, I should be thinking things. I must explain them in terms of risks, problems to the company, not its financial statements. Talk about problems for the company. And that is going to be things like anything which could cause them cash flow issues, anything that could reduce their profits, anything that could damage their reputation, anything that could cause them legal problems, operational problems. So it's all in terms of the company. That's the thing we're meant to be thinking about and explaining. And one more thing to remember with business risks in terms of technique. There is a slight risk here that we end up copying bits of the story out and saying, there you go, that's a risk. So as I mentally prepare myself for this question, I tell myself, don't just copy question, I must add some value. Now, of course, this is not the actual answer I'm doing here. I'm just preparing myself before I read the story. So this is my technique. These are my tactics. I would not write this amount myself if I were you answering the question. There's no need to write so much. I'm writing this much here for you now to show you what's going on in my head when I see business risks. I would just think, must consider the business, not the financial statements, and try to add. But that's the sort of thing we need to be thinking. Now I'm going to go back and we're going to look at part B. Part B says, identify and explain, again, the risks of material misstatement. So now I'm thinking things. Just before I go and note my technique down, it tells me that the risks are to do with a health and safety breach and a decision not to renew the gym equipment. And all of that is 8 marks. So this is what I'm thinking. Part B. Risks of material misstatement. How should I be explaining these? Well, I should be talking about which item in the financial statements and maybe an IAS, IFRS and accounting standard relevant to what I'm reading. I need to explain why I think they might be at risk of getting this thing wrong. And I should try to say whether I think they're at risk of getting it overstated, understated, or if it's a disclosure item, underdisclosed. Now, as long as my explanations follow that sort of approach, I'm going to pick up the marks. I saw in the question it was worth a total of 8 marks, and there are 2 separate things I've got to talk about. There's a health and safety breach, and they have decided not to renew some equipment. Gym equipment, I think it was. Now, I'm thinking something here. In part A of the question, we needed to do business risks. And I'm thinking if you have health and safety issues, that sounds like a business risk to me. So I already think I know what one of their business risks is going to be. And health and safety could cause damage or injury to your staff, your customers, and anyone else who comes to your building. And if you are doing that, you could upset your staff, upset your customers, legal cases, which is going to cause reputation issues and costs to the company. And I'm thinking another thing, health and safety can also lead to your business being closed down, either temporarily or permanently. And that obviously is a business risk, because if you can't operate, you can't make any money.